So we are going to talk about tics and the immune system this morning. This is one of my favorite studies. And here's what I like to do with studies. I like to look at the studies. I like to read the studies. And then I like to say to myself, what is this study missing? What could we be looking for? So, studies are very looking at, one or two factors. It's not looking at multiple factors. So when I'm looking at a study, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things missing, and there's a lot of connection that we need to consider in here when we are looking at tic disorders and all of the things that go with tic disorders. I like to call it the laundry list of symptoms. Kirk says, yes, he's definitely plugging in the Google, and I saw Jackie jump on. I know that Jackie's looking at Google as well. So when we are looking at tics and the immune system, I love the data. I love the data. I am a science data nerd. So people hear the word holistic and they think, oh, she's gonna rub her crystals on me and she's gonna come over and she's gonna sage my house. No. Holistic means whole body. We are gonna look at the connection to your whole body. But I'm gonna look at the data. We're gonna look at test results. We're gonna look at studies. We're gonna look at the symptoms your child has experienced since birth. When you work with me, you will start to realize, the symptoms for tics started a lot earlier than they got diagnosed, which is really the case with most chronic illnesses. Those symptoms started creeping on way earlier than you thought, way earlier than you expected. But let's talk about this study. And what I feel is, and what I know from clinical experience, is that all of the things our kids are experiencing are all coming from the same place. I don't care if your child has tics, OCD, sensory processing, ADHD, bad behavior, whatever the case may be. I feel like they very much come from the same place. And we're gonna talk about how those things are connected. So in this study, this is a 2021 study, and it's about allergic diseases influencing symptoms severity in children with tic disorders. So there are other multiple studies. When we look at the studies, there are multiple studies at this point saying dysregulation. There's more than one study out there talking about how your child's tic disorder, maybe it's your tic disorder, is connected to immune system dysregulation. So how many of you out there have been told that by your physician or your doctor or your naturopath or your chiropractor or whoever it is that you're working with? So what do we need to know about our immune system? What do we need to know about our immune system? 90% of your immune system is where? It's in your gut. 90% of your immune system is in your gut. Did you know that? Did you know that a majority of your immune system is located in your gut? Yeah, most people do not know that. Most people do not know that connection. When you go to your neurologist, to your neurology appointment, they do not say, ooh, what's going on in your child's gut? What's happening in their gut? They don't talk to you about that. I know they certainly didn't talk to me about that. They really told me, I think your child just needs a good spanking, which was definitely not the case. And so here is where we're gonna dig into this study a little bit, but we're looking at, so I've got the study on my screen and I'm streaming from my phone, but when we're looking at this, we are looking at the fact that they're associating immune dysfunction and allergies with tic disorders. But they're not talking about, well, how is that all connected to your gut? And how is your gut connected to your brain? So when we're looking at this study, we're looking at this missing piece of the puzzle, because your immune system is a very important piece of what is happening in your child's body. When you get sick, I was very sick last month, you have to have your immune system jump on, start to, get the bad guys. Your immune system needs to be functioning. But when your immune system is already in high alert, you get sick, that immune system's already like, hang on, I'm already doing too much work. Your immune system is, what I'm gonna say is overloaded. Your immune system is definitely overloaded. So most of our kids' diagnosis, it is a behavioral diagnosis. There's not a marker that people are able to look at and say, oh, there's, PANS or PANDAS or whatever the case may be. They're really just looking at those behaviors and they're saying, oh, well, based on this behavior, your child's doing this, they have a tic. but never looking any deeper. What is going on under the hood? Tics for me are your body's check engine light. They're your body's check engine light. If you're driving down the street and your check engine light comes on, you might drive around for a few days. Maybe if you're really bad, you might drive around for a couple weeks before you get your car into the shop, and you take it to the mechanic and you say, hey man, what's happening with my car? They're gonna hook it up to all of their diagnostic tools and tell you, hey, this is what's happening with your car. If that mechanic came out and just observed your car, like walked around, checked it out, and was like, knocks on the hood and goes, hey, just put some gas in it, go home, you'd be furious. So for me, this is that approach we're taking with our kids. It's perfectly acceptable for somebody to observe our kids and say, this is what's happening, just ignore it, just sweep that under the rug, maybe they'll grow out of it, without ever giving you any explanation or hope or anything to go along with it. So when we look at this study, allergies and immune system, allergies stem from imbalances in the gut. So yes, my child started out with massive amounts of allergies. He was allergic to everything. I mean, I like to say somebody farted in the wrong direction and we were gonna have an increase in tics. He was allergic to everything. Why? Because his immune system was on high alert. So anything out of the ordinary or anything in the ordinary would trigger him because his immune system was like, what's happening? What's going on? And that's what's happening for most of the kids that I work with. Their immune system is like, what's going on? What's happening? And so every single thing sets them off. And when we look at this study, we know that these things are associated with your neurological system and your immune system. We call it neuroimmune. This is where I use the comprehensive neuroimmune analysis to look at 935 biomarkers to help my clients really figure out what's going on at the root. And we are always working on things like the gut because your immune system is located in your gut. So, well, the majority of your immune system is located in your gut. I'm not going to say all of it because that is not true. You have specialized immune cells in your brain. So this is what happens. Your immune system gets turned on, whether it's an allergic reaction or you're sick, or you've got a lot of kids who've got underlying infections or mold toxicity or heavy metals. Heavy metals are a little bit more rare than things like mold toxicity and underlying infections, but their immune systems are turned on. And when your immune system is turned on, it's just not systemic. It's not like just in your pinky finger. It's systemic. It's throughout your whole body, and your gut and your brain are connected. And if you have leaky gut, you're gonna have all sorts of other stuff going on in your brain. But what happens is your microglial cells become activated. Piper, what are microglial cells? Microglial cells are the specialized immune cells in your brain. And so when those become activated, you get a lot of activity in the brain because your body has to protect your brain. So these microglial cells become activated and we end up with what's called a glutamate storm. So glutamate is very, very excitatory. It is abundant in our brain, but when we have this immune response, we end up with a glutamate storm. We end up with a lot more glutamate. We end up with calcium release. We end up with neuron death. We end up with a lot of activity going on in the brain. And a lot of times, a lot of the kids I'm working with have what's called poor autophagy, meaning they don't have very good cellular recycling. They're not getting the glucose into the cell very well because their cells are full of trash. So you have this component added on to this immune system activation. So when we start to look at the data, when we start to look at the studies, we can see, hey, there's all of this information about immune system dysregulation, tic disorders, and their comorbidities. So things like OCD. So one of the additional studies that I really like to look at is the one about the comorbidities and the tic disorders and the immune dysregulation. So you have to consider that your immune system is playing a role. So this is why I really work holistically, because when you go to your doctor, it is very reductionist. You have your neurologist looking at tics are purely neurological. And then you have your gastroenterologists that are like, there's, I don't see anything in the gut, but they're never doing a stool pathogen test. If you don't have gut symptoms, they're not going to look at your stool, which is crazy to me because I've done hundreds and hundreds of stool pathogen tests. So to see those results and to see these kids with these underlying infections and drivers of inflammation is incredibly interesting to me. But your neurologist and your gastroenterologist don't talk to each other. And I'm gonna assume that probably 90% of you, 95% of you have not even had your kid to a gastroenterologist because they're not making that connection. And so when we're looking at this, we have to look at all of the systems in your body are connected. Your gut and your brain are connected, your immune system, your neurological system, your digestive system. It is not what most of us learned in high school biology, that we had all of these separate systems and they were not connected. They are connected. They're very connected, and your gut and your brain are connected by your vagus nerve. So when we look at the studies, when we look at the data, you have to understand that part of this is what we consider translational medicine. And what does that mean? That means that these studies, this study that came out in 2021, it's going to be at least 30 years before it's taught in medical school, if it's ever taught in medical school. So we have all of these really good studies, but it takes that long for those things to be taught in medical school. So, you know, a lot of times, unless your doctor is on top of it and they're doing lots of research and they're looking at all of the data outside of their practice, what they learned in medical school is 30 years old, which is really disheartening. You want to really look at the connection between your gut and your brain and your immune system. So the data is out there, the studies are out there. We're going to talk about more studies. I mean, I have a long list of things that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks. So we're going to talk about vitamin D. We're going to talk about tics and neurotransmitters. We're going to talk about tics and medications. We're going to talk about, is it different in boys and girls? And we're going to talk about all of these studies and all of this data and how all of this plays out for your child. So in short, your immune system and your neurological system are connected, and we are seeing this just overload, this dysregulation of the immune system. I don't care what label your child has, there is this overload of our immune system. We live in the most toxic time period in history. We live in what I like to call a toxic soup. There's chemicals and toxins everywhere. There's crappy food that we're eating. Most people in a day eat less than 2% beef. So beef, protein, whatever, meat, animal protein. People are eating less than 2% of their total calories in protein. Your DNA creates proteins, but it has to have the building blocks to build proteins. So, you know, there's a post on here you can go back and look at about where I talk about protein, but when you consider the garbage food that we're eating, if we're eating less than 2% of our protein in a day, and 60% of the calories that we are consuming are processed foods, oils, and crappy sugar, that's really, really significant. And those foods are going to play a huge role in how your immune system, your neurological system, your digestive system, how they all work and function. It's going to play a huge, huge role. So when we talk about holistic, we have to talk about there is a connection, and I'm looking at the data and I'm looking at the science. I'm just applying it much differently. I'm really looking at it from more of this nutritional perspective, from a genetic perspective. I'm not looking at it from, oh, they're just purely neurological, because I do not believe that's the case, and you can read all about that in the book. So if you guys have not gotten TikTok, it's Common Misconceptions, Natural Solutions, and Real Conversations about Tic Disorders. But in this story, I really share in this book, I share our story in depth, and then I really start to break it down. And even in chapter 3, tics are not purely neurological. I'm going to break it down for you. It's in here. So if you are new to the group and you're like, oh my gosh, where the heck do I start? This is so overwhelming. I've been there. This is why there is a book. You can grab the book. It is on Amazon. It's just TikTok, and it's Piper Gibson. You'll be able to find that on Amazon. You can also go to my website. It's www.regenerating.health. And you can go to the website. There is a quiz on there. Find out what's at the root of your child's tic disorder. That's a really good place to start. You can take the quiz. You can grab the book. There's blogs on there. There's videos on there. You can book a free initial consultation call on there. So Danielle, she and her daughter Natalia have been through my program, and Danielle now works for me. She is my intake specialist. You can book a call with her, and she is going to take a very in-depth health history. It is a free consultation call, and we are going to get that health history from you. We're going to talk about what's going on, and then she's going to share how we work. So if you're interested in grabbing that call, I highly recommend you go to the website and do it. It says initial consult call at the top. You can book that there, and it is completely free.